We have to quit counting on the medical system and our family doctors to be the ones to save us from all of these problems. They are not trained in getting to the root problem. And so we go to them in hopes that they're going to and thinking that they should, but that's not what they're trained in.
Hello there, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to Truehope Cast, the official Truehope Canada podcast. My name is Simon. I've got the honour of being your host today. Truehope Canada is a mind and body based supplement company that is dedicated first and foremost to promoting brain and body health through non-invasive nutritional means. And our current series of podcast episodes discusses how different therapies, practices and practitioners apply their profession to the huge topic that is mental health. For more information about Truehope, you can visit truehopecanada.com, and we're on all of the usual social media sites. We've got another amazing guest with us today, transformational nutrition coach Karen Martel. Karen lives and practices in Kamloops, BC, and has a very special focus on women's weight loss resistance and hormone health. And that's going to be the focus of our chat today, weight loss, hormones, and how that all blends into mental health. So thank you, Karen, for joining us. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, Simon.
Awesome. Well, big topic when it comes to anything related to mental health, but obviously so many practitioners have to take mental health into consideration, especially in the early days of 2021. So why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into becoming this transformational nutritional coach healer?
Mm-hmm. Well, my story actually began after I had my first child. And I was 33 years old, had my baby, lost all the weight afterwards. And then once I stopped breastfeeding, I started to gain weight. And I've always been a healthy person, Simon. I've always eaten really well. I've always exercised. And so there I was going, okay, well, what's going on here? Like, okay, well, let's try this diet. So I started to explore different ways of eating. I really tried, I think, everything between I was vegan. I started doing juicing. What else? Detoxing. I did Atkins diet. I did the zone diet. I did the master cleanse. Did it all. And nothing worked. And I continued to gain weight. And so I hired a personal trainer and I thought, okay, then it's the exercise. So I started going to this boot camp here in Kamloops 6 days a week. I was going with the personal trainer. I was working out harder than I'd ever worked out in my life. And all these women were with me in this exact same class and I was doing the exact same workout and they're all looking shredded. And there I was continuing to gain weight. And that wasn't the only thing going on. At the same time, I feel like within months, I suddenly couldn't sleep anymore. So I had severe insomnia where I couldn't fall asleep sometimes till 4 o'clock in the morning. And this was happening every single night. I started developing skin rashes. And so I would eat something and then my body would break out in these hives. I started getting severe PMS, which would go for weeks before getting my period. I was getting severe menstrual migraines, which would last for sometimes 10 days straight. I was tired. My stomach looked like there was a basketball inside of it all the time. So I was super bloated. And I was just going, what is happening to my body? And, I went to the doctor and of course, I was put on an antidepressant for the PMS. I was put on a sleeping medication for the sleep. I was given an acid blocker for the digestive system. And none of these things were working and it was terrible. I just continually felt worse.
Just to jump in there. So from child breastfeeding and then kind of starting this journey to going into the doctor's office, because that's kind of like, you've literally tried everything in regards to doing dietary nutrition things to exercising really hard, it sounds like. And you obviously come to a point where it's like, okay, I've got to go into a doctor's office. So what was the kind of time period between, the beginning of that journey to going into a conventional medical practice?
For the insomnia, it was within a few months because I wasn't sleeping. For the digestive stuff, it was probably about a year afterwards. I started also within months of the menstrual migraines that were happening. I was on just like heavy duty triptans, which are medication for migraines. So I'd say all within a year, I kind of like I would try things, and there was just those things. I just felt like my hands were tied. I just felt like diet and exercise weren't going to work, and I had to go and see if maybe the doctor could give me something. And so the insomnia medication, it was a Band-Aid, but it worked. It got me sleeping again, right? The antidepressant didn't work. I didn't feel any better, so I stopped taking it.
Yeah, and obviously there's a time and a place for everything.
Absolutely.
And it sounds like the medications for insomnia worked wonders, and that was obviously important for you because you're obviously not sleeping for such a long time, and you're anxious and getting more and more kind of deep in the depression of all these things that you're trying and not seeing those results. And obviously so many people can resonate with that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, what happened next? At that point, had you done any like deeper educational qualifications when it comes to health, nutrition, hormones, weight loss?
Nope, nothing. I was always extremely interested in it, and since my early 20s, I had wanted to become a nutritionist, and instead I went into the field of body work. And it's funny because it's something that was always in the back of my head that I was super keen on doing, and I always was doing my own research on stuff, probably because of my own health problems, and I would always try and fix myself, and I've always been a research junkie, so I would dive in and go down these rabbit holes, and that's basically what ended up happening. And as I had decided that I had to fix this somehow, and so I went on a mission to kind of figure out what could this be. And Simon, nobody at 33 years old is going to tell me that I had hormone dysfunction, because people just don't think that it happens that early. A doctor's not going to say, well, let's test your hormones because it sounds like it's hormonal. And I ended up doing my own research, coming up with the fact that, oh, you know what? Because I also had endometriosis. I had ovarian cysts. I'd been into the hospital. I had a laparoscopy done. I had a C-section with my daughter. So I kind of thought, there is this, to me, I was like, there's something hormonal here. Hormonal migraines, right? So I was like, okay, let's see what I can do about that. And I went to a naturopath and I asked him, could you test my hormones? And he, of course, was like, yes, of course, you should be testing your hormones. And I tested my hormones via a saliva hormone test, and we can talk about why that was an important way to test at the time for my age. And it came up that I was very estrogen dominant, which would explain the endometriosis and the ovarian cysts and the menstrual migraines. I had very little progesterone in my body, these two very important hormones. And my cortisol was shot. My cortisol and my DHEA, which are both adrenal hormones, were at the very bottom. And I had never thought in a million years, that I was even a stressed out person. I was just doing what every other North American woman's doing, working, 5 days a week. I was running my own business. I had a little girl that I was a single mother of, just going, working out, doing everything, what everybody else is doing. And I never thought I was, considered stressed out. And I was. And my hormone results showed me that.
Wow. And it sounds like you went through so much, I want to say, going towards external things, whether that's a different diet or a different nutrition plan or workout, something like that. And then it took for you to maybe go a bit internally and really start thinking about what you're experiencing, doing your own research a little bit. And then, you took the step to go to a naturopath. And that obviously was the best step for you. And, immediately straight in with the hormone panel. And I'm sure that when it comes to certain ages of anybody that, it's really important to check in on those, because as you say, you experience so many different physiological conditions, and all of them absolutely connected to hormones. So that's fantastic that you took that step, but it's interesting that you had to kind of sit down with yourself, realize what was kind of going on, and have that kind of self-epiphany moment where you're able to really kind of okay, this is me, this is what I'm experiencing, and kind of everything I've done before to try and fix, in quotations, what you're going through. And then you go to a naturopath, and you actually see the actual results from doing an actual test that many people should be on. And it's kind of frightening that that doctors all over the world aren't more attuned to a really simple procedure. So you go to the naturopath, you get this panel done, and then what happens from there?
Well, it took a long time to fix. It wasn't an overnight fix by any means. It took me a couple years, but it was funny because I did complete opposite of what I was doing because of what my hormones showed me. I decided to quit all that exercise and in order to help heal my adrenal system, and instead I started doing yoga every day. And I found at that time a paleo based diet, which was the exact right thing for my body at that time as far as food went. I needed something that was lower inflammatory, that stabilized my blood sugar, because that was the other thing. My blood sugar was all over the place. I couldn't leave my house without a snack in my bag because my blood sugar would drop so bad. So I had to do all of these little things that were very opposite of what I had been doing. And, I was eating like the so-called healthy diet at that time, which was, whole grains. I was eating my brown rice and drinking my skim milk and thinking I was doing this great job for myself. And those were exactly the wrong foods for my body at that time. And years later, I even found out that I was also severely hypothyroid, which the doctors missed numerous times because they weren't testing me properly. And found out that I was also had very, very like off the charts high levels of lead in my body, some mercury and some cadmium. And looking back, I think it was pregnancy. When you're pregnant, your bones soften. Lead stores itself in the bones. And so I personally think that that's what happened. And lead will actually occupy a hormone receptor site so that people can become very hormonally imbalanced because of it. So I feel like that was part of it, was being pregnant basically opened the gates to a lot of this stuff. And now since then I've always just had to work on it basically.
Wow, I didn't know that about the lead occupying receptor sites. That's huge. And obviously if that goes on for a long period of time and your body is continually, not getting that message, that hormone message through to cells, it's going to completely flood. And at some point it's, the body's got to give.
Yes. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So, I mean, that's quite the journey.
Yes, it's quite the journey. And so it took me still a very long time to stop what I was doing as far as the body work went, because I really wanted to become a nutritionist and go or do something in this field. And I always just had that limiting belief, like who would hire a nutritionist over a naturopath? And so I just kept putting it off. And we know what happens when you ignore what life's trying to tell you. Sometimes life has to knock you upside the head.
Sure.
And my body started to go downhill just from doing the body work. And I was down to only being able to do maybe 1 or 2 sessions a day. And so I knew at that point I had to do something. And so it kind of forced my hand into becoming a nutritionist. So I became a nutrition coach, and I decided there's got to be more women that are like me that are experiencing weight loss resistance and hormone dysfunction, and that they don't know it, that they're still doing what everybody else is telling them to do, which is you should be calorie restricting and you should be working out harder.
Yeah, which obviously we know that, especially from your journey where you went from going really hard, a lot of excess, and then, your treatment after that was yoga, very like parasympathetic things, anti-inflammatory diet, actually giving your body the ability to heal, recover, and replenish rather than, constantly go. And that's obviously an interesting paradigm we have when it comes to weight loss. We think it's very simple: calories in, calories out, and burning them, etc. And obviously it's a lot more complicated than that, especially when you throw the complications of endocrine hormones. So okay, so now you're on this journey. Life's giving you this kick up the butt, and now now you're in this educational. Because, in my experience and opinion of speaking and working with a lot of different practitioners, the best ones go through something like that to become this inspirational person, because they genuinely, authentically connect with other individuals, many other individuals who experience the same thing day in, day out, and they think they're doing the right things by following certain government guidelines, and maybe something to do with cultural requirements as well, but not seeing those results. And then if you throw the mental health application into that type of experience of you're going, you're trying to do all these things and you're not seeing those results, how kind of devastating that ends up being. And a lot of people may just spiral into kind of an opposite effect or something like that, and not maybe find the path that you did. But you luckily enough did, or the path found you, however you want to look at it, and you're there now to be able to, go and educate yourself and be able to learn how to, support other people through that journey.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it amazes me, Simon, how many people still think that it's the diet that's the problem, or it's the workout that's the problem. And I mean, this is 95% of people that come to me tell me the same story, which is, and I attract very healthy people in the sense that they come to me, they're like, oh, Karen, I've been doing a ketogenic diet for 2 years with no carbs and this amount of calories, and I work out and I still can't lose weight, or I'm gaining weight. And you go into these, keto's like the most popular diet in the world right now. So I'm going to use that as an example.
Yeah.
I'm part of many forums on Facebook just to kind of see what people are talking about. And without fail, if I looked on a daily basis, there's always people on there going, I can't lose weight or I stopped losing weight on keto. What am I doing wrong here? And that person will get 100 different responses, comments, and they all say, you're not doing it right. You need to lower your carbohydrates. You need to lower your calories, start fasting, go carnivore. Those are the 3 things. And I'm like, oh, you poor woman. Yeah. It's not that. It's your hormones. And you go low carb when you have adrenal issues. That is the worst thing that you can do. And women nowadays, we're in an epidemic of adrenal issues in this country between men and women. Women tend to not process cortisol as well as men do. So here we are, and especially as we age. So as we're aging, we're getting into our late 30s, early 40s, cortisol becomes more of a problem. We're dropping in all of these other hormones, and everyone's being told to go on a ketogenic diet and to drop their carbs, which, don't get me wrong, keto can be the most phenomenal diet for some women, but that's if those women, let's say, have insulin resistance, they don't have cortisol issues, they don't have a thyroid problem, they do awesome, and it'll correct that insulin resistance faster than any other diet. But most women these days, at least the ones I'm working with, have an adrenal problem, whether it's too high cortisol or too low. They also goes hand in hand with a thyroid problem. And the research shows, and there's many keto advocates that will fight me on this, and I'll fight. I've done my research. I've been in the ketogenic world for years. I've put thousands of women on a ketogenic diet, and it does slow down your thyroid. I actually tested myself. I tested my thyroid, and I've had, like I said, I have a thyroid issue. I have a conversion problem between T4 and T3 as well. I've got this low cortisol DHEA that I have to be very careful with. And I tested before I did the keto diet, and I tested again 6 weeks later, and my thyroid went down.
Yeah. Wow.
Without any other change besides the fact that I went keto.
Yeah, there's a big when it comes to keto, paleo, vegan, whatever you want to call it, there's a lot of I want to call it cultism around it, and a lot of people are unable to see that not one thing is going to work or benefit somebody else, especially if you're unable to even look at their blood work.
Yes. Yeah.
Or different panels. I mean, obviously they're super important, and just hearing about the different groups, whether that's on Facebook or wherever, and people are sharing their personal stories and looking for help. That just shows me the struggle and the desperation that a lot of people are going through, and some of those communities and groups can be really, really beneficial. But as you say, when you get 300 answers telling you that you're doing everything wrong and you should be doing this, that's when those things aren't super helpful, and that's when obviously going to see somebody who's a professional and really well trained and is going to take all of your circumstances into more like a holistic approach into consideration, and obviously actually doing tests.
It has to be personalized nutrition. That's where it has to go. And don't get me wrong, there's some diets that I've seen work better than others, being in this industry, and definitely the lower inflammatory ones like keto, paleo, autoimmune paleo. I've definitely seen those work better when it comes to weight loss resistance, digestion, mental health, especially when the gut's inflamed, the brain's inflamed, and there's a huge connection between that. So a lot of people have to use those types of diets to heal their system, and then they can start having more variation in it. But everybody has to just be open-minded, and I say you have to find what I call is your weight loss code. And that could be the same as you just need to find your health code, which is going to look different for every single one of us. We're all dealing with different problems. You might have gut problems, you might have insulin resistance. Well, then, maybe a keto diet might be better. You might have an autoimmune condition, you might have to do autoimmune. Maybe you don't do well with meat and you need to be vegan for a while. We just have to stay open-minded.
Absolutely, yeah, and that personalized nutritional approach is obviously very important because of not only are our bodies different, but our circumstances, our work schedules, our stress levels, etc. We all have a very, very different lifestyles. So just throwing like one diet book at everybody, it's just if you have any experience in trying different diets, that's not going to work.
No.
What percentage of your clientele experience mental health related conditions, whether that's anxiety, depression, or anything more extreme?
I have 3 things that I hear almost from every single person I've worked with, and I've worked with thousands of women. The top 3: weight gain, anxiety and depression, and sex drive. Those are the 3. The top. And then underneath, we got energy and digestive problems. But those are always the top 3. And anxiety and depression, I almost hear, Simon, across the board from people. It's really sad, actually. I feel bad.
And is that in the last year, or say 10 months, I suppose, is that increased even more? Is that...
Oh, I've heard a lot because of the COVID.
Yeah.
People not being able to handle their health anymore. So these people were maybe doing really, really well with their diet and hormones and stuff like that. And then COVID hit and I've got, things are so bad right now. I'm not eating well. Everything's gone out the door. I'm not exercising. So that tells me that yes, the anxiety and depression has gotten worse.
Yeah. And people obviously not having the same access to their communities and their support groups, which is obviously a huge part.
Yeah.
But obviously a lot of that journey is, personal on their own and different circumstances that, COVID has affected people is obviously going to be taken into consideration. Do you feel there's like a direct correlation between, the hormonal balance? I think you said 95% of people who come into you are experiencing some level of hormone imbalance and mood disorders. But you see a correlation between the two of them.
100%. Yeah. We're not being told that our hormones can affect mental health. And I think it's a very sad thing. I think that I say shame on you doctors for not helping women more with their hormones, especially in today's day and age. We're seeing it younger and younger and younger. I mean, you see it just in the rise of infertility. It's massive. It's worse than it's ever been.
Yeah.
That's hormonal. We're seeing way more things like polycystic ovarian syndrome, endometriosis. The list goes on, and no doctor's saying, this might be, you might have depression or anxiety because you don't have any estrogen left in your system or you don't have any progesterone. Doctors don't say that. It's here's your antidepressant. And by no means is there anything wrong with that. And people need to be open to taking that route. But just as long as everybody also knows, you can also look to your hormones, because I have seen that be the missing link for mental health in countless and countless women, and especially as we age, because as we age, we start to lose. And when we hit our late 30s, early 40s, we start to drop in a hormone called progesterone. Well, progesterone it reacts on what's called the GABA receptors of the brain. I'm not sure if you guys have a product that has GABA in it, maybe, or no?
I don't believe we do, no.
Well, it's a very anti-anxiety GABA. You can buy it. I'm sure everyone's probably seen it in the health food stores. It's a neurotransmitter in your brain that helps to keep you calm. Well, progesterone acts on those receptors. So it acts like a GABA. And so it calms the brain. So what you'll see is women start to get more and more PMS, for instance, because it's the second half of a woman's cycle, we produce progesterone. And that progesterone, if it's not there, the anxiety goes up. And for some women, it really goes up. And so here we are in our 40s, our progesterone's dropping by about 75% of our fertile 20s and 30 years, right? In those times, it's nice and high, and then it just starts to plummet. And we see this rise in anxiety and insomnia that go with it. And it can be, and even with postpartum depression. Oftentimes it's because we produce so much progesterone in our pregnancy. You have the baby and those progesterone levels plummet and crash. And it's one of the causes of postpartum depression. Women are not being told this.
Yeah, it's a huge part, and I think education, without question, is a big part of that. You know, it's easy to point the finger at doctors, I suppose, but I've not been to medical school, but I don't know how much they talk about that in their practice. Most likely not much at all. As you say, there's somebody comes in with a list of symptoms, diagnosis, pharmaceutical, maybe another intervention, but yeah, it definitely comes down to that. And it takes I think there's only maybe a small amount of people that actually go on their own journey and start their own research and then actually take their own health into their own hands and push for certain tests, for example. But yeah, it's that lack of education that's really kind of actually ticks me off, because when I went to school, let's say I didn't get into studying nutrition until I was about 29, and before that, if you said the word hormone to me, I might be able to reel off.
You could be like, oh yeah, I've got testosterone.
Yeah, but nothing more than that. And I think that there's a responsibility for schools, governments to be explaining to men and women what happens in the body. And then when I did my nutrition degree, and we were talking about hormones, and primarily female hormone health, because it's viciously more complicated. It gave me, just looking at the hormones that go up and down and all around, especially during like a cycle or a pregnancy, how complicated that whole process is. And when you chuck something in like birth control or a stressful event or loads of exercise or the wrong diet, you are really tinkering with a really, really complex set of cascade of events that can cause literally any type of illness. Mm-hmm. Especially when we're talking about like autoimmunity or an endocrine problem. But it's that lack of knowing and that lack of education that really stops a lot of people from feeling great, especially during those 30s to 40s, because I think what we like to do in our culture, what we do in our 20s, we want to kind of keep the party going, but obviously our bodies change, circumstances change, and you can't fight that. Unfortunately, you kind of have to adapt and learn and re-educate yourself. But that's the thing that's massively missing for me all over the park when it comes to what can I do to improve my sleep, to lower my anxiety levels. And it's so much more than just saying, oh, okay, maybe work's a little bit more stressful, I've got this new child. It's just so much more complicated than that, and we look in our culture for very simple answers. Yeah. And that's an example of going in and just getting an antidepressant for something rather than looking a little bit deeper. As I say, I don't blame medical system for that. I think it's just a really poor, it's just not set up as it could be.
Here's the thing, and this is what I've realized in the last few years, and I say it to everybody, which is we have to quit counting on the medical system and our family doctors to be the ones to save us from all of these problems. They are not trained in getting to the root problem. And so we go to them in hopes that they're going to and thinking that they should, but that's not what they're trained in. They're trained in medication and life-saving. Where would we be without it? Yeah. I'm not dissing them. I'm saying that their part is over here for what they're good for, but we have to quit looking to them to get to the root of the problem. They're trained to give you the Band-Aid and say, here's the drugs. In most cases, none of those drugs are going to cure the problem. It's going to get rid of your symptoms. And that can be great, especially while you're trying to figure out maybe what the root cause is. You may need to be on those antidepressants or anti-anxiety while you try and figure it out. So they have their place, but don't count on them for that, because they're not trained in bioidentical hormone therapy. They're not trained in supplements. They're not trained in diet. It's astonishing. Half the time they could just be saying, change your diet, and all of these people's ailments could go away, but they don't. So we just have to quit counting on it so that we could then quit getting frustrated with them, because it's just not their job.
Absolutely. And there's definitely some self-responsibility that comes with that as well, right? Because you can't, as I say, a typical doctor's appointment, I think in Canada is maybe 8 to 12 minutes.
Yeah. Oh, if you're lucky, 12.
Yeah. Like, how can you possibly expect to tell somebody like the last 10 years of your life of something you've been experiencing in that period of time, to be able to, you know, get to a real root cause. And obviously a drug or another intervention is, as you say, a band-aid, but the place is definitely emergency medicine. And for long-term chronic illnesses that has, you know, come over years or even decades in some cases, there's definitely a lot of personal responsibility that a patient should be taking.
I think so.
But sometimes the access to that information can be either scarce or overwhelming. I think I think nowadays in most cities and towns, you can find nutritionists and naturopaths. Hopefully you can find one that can have a good conversation with you and, you know, start putting a little bit of responsibility on the client and holding them accountable and pointing them in the right direction in regards to like what a true healing root process takes. Because you said, you know, you took a couple of years of, I'm sure, hard habitual change and work. It doesn't come easy, like changing things.
No. And I think we need to get it out of our head that healthcare should be free. For that stuff, yeah, but I think we need to separate it and be like, we need to be willing to spend the money to go see a functional medicine practitioner and maybe do some testing. And in the end, it'll actually be cheaper. I think about all the time and money I spent trying to figure out what supplement to take, what book I was reading, what diet I was going to, you know, about what diet to do or whatever it was. Like I did so much and spent so much money when I should have just gone to a functional medicine practitioner and figured it out and did the testing. But back then too, this was, you know, a long time ago. So over 10 years ago, well, 14 years ago now. So it's different now. And I think people are definitely more open to it. We just still have a hard time spending the money on our health, which is a shame.
Yeah, in my experience, a lot of people who come and see me as a nutritionist are people that are basically fed up and they've actually experienced that the conventional system doesn't work for them. So a lot of people in their 40s, 50s and 60s who they've literally tried everything under the sun and they've not had the experience that they expect. They've basically just not healed. They've been, you know, prevented, and they've been gone on and off different medications and tried different things, going back to the doctors. But then it just takes being, you know, that one appointment where it's like, okay, that it just isn't working, and then step out and maybe Google for someone else, like a naturopath or a nutritionist or something, and then that's actually taking that personal responsibility that I was talking about.
Yeah.
You become a little bit more assertive when it comes to your healthcare, and you're going to have to, in some cases, pay out of pocket for that and pay for, you know, secondary healthcare. But as you say, like in the long term, how beneficial that can be. And, you know, there's some really great practices out there now that you can get on certain benefit plans, whether that's acupuncture or nutrition. I think that insurance companies are getting better at that. It's still really, really slow, but there's some really amazing people out there who can offer some support and help. And I think that's without question the biggest thing is someone that can sit across from a table and you listen to their story as a practitioner, and then you have that connection, and then you see this weight lifted off somebody, and it's okay, this is where we're at. We're going to start nice and easy. We're going to do this and this. And then, you know, you feel a bit taken care of, and then you feel like, okay, it's not super scary anymore. And I'm sure you've had that experience a million times.
And really having access to the World Wide Web, if you have some very specific issue, whether it's an autoimmune condition or for me, hormonal, you can see people all over the world that's their special niche, right? That's what they specialize in, is gut health, is autoimmune conditions. I have clients in Kuwait. I have a number of them because they can't get the help there for their hormones. And these are women that are going, what is happening to my body? No one can help me over here. And they're my clients. I have people in Australia. I have people in the United States, all over the world. And anybody has access to people like that.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's so much information about there available. As you say, like there's practitioners all over the world. We're using traditional medicines and conventional medicines, and without question, the best ones kind of blend the two. Once you've reached a kind of certain level of success with your clients, do you see an overall improvement in mood?
Yeah, it depends. I tend to work, Simon, with a lot of women that are going through the transition into menopause. So I start seeing women usually when anywhere from late 30s to late 50s. That seems to be who I attract the most. And So with that said, if a woman is still in her fertile years and she's still cycling, there's so much that we can do for mental health that's natural, whether that's change of diet. Sometimes it's just simply trying to figure out, a woman's food sensitivities, getting rid of those, and suddenly the brain starts to work better. But as they age, what starts to happen is the ovaries just simply quit making these hormones. And I really want to get this message across, because many women think, well, this is natural. I'm supposed to be going into menopause, so I just need to suffer through this.
Like it's normal.
Like it's normal. But what's not normal is to suffer for 7 to 10 years, which is the average of perimenopause. So, and it's different degrees for every woman, but usually about 80% of women will get symptoms. If not more than that, I think it's maybe 85%. So here are these women that are going to their doctors saying, I'm depressed, I'm anxious, I can't sleep, I'm having hot flashes, I'm night sweats, my libido's gone, so my relationship isn't doing very well anymore. Also because of the anxiety and depression. I'm a snap show. Husbands will say, what's happened to my wife? And so women are given the drugs to band-aid each of these symptoms. And it's too bad, because we have access to bioidentical hormones. And there's a lot of misconceptions around, a lot of false information around the safety of hormones. And in the environment that we're in today, with all the toxic load and the stress, we are not going through menopause in a very nice way. Right? Like I hit 42 and I started going into perimenopause and started missing a period. I was getting depressed. My thyroid went into the toilet, all within a year. And I was like, what? This is me, the hormone weight loss coach. And I'm going, okay, I just packed on 10 pounds in a month. My hormone, my thyroid's in the toilet. My estrogen and progesterone took a dive. Okay, I guess this is what I'm supposed to learn next. Right? And I see so many women going through that, whether it's when they're 42 or they're 48, but suddenly all of their life as they know it is gone. And it's very depressing. And you see these women that some of them want to commit suicide.
Yeah.
Divorce happens, and it's all because their body doesn't have estrogen and progesterone. And estrogen, there's a lot of research coming out right now on estrogen, which everybody's very afraid of estrogen because of breast cancer. And it all goes back to a study, if I may talk about this, get rid of some of the myths. Back in 2002, there's a women's health initiative that took place, and this was the largest study ever done on hormone replacement therapy. In the 1950s, estrogen therapy was the number one, and up to that point, it was the number one prescribed drug in America. Was Premarin.
Wow. Okay.
Yes. So Premarin is pregnant horses' urine. And they get, if that's where the estrogen comes from.
Okay.
It's not like our own.
No.
It's when you look at it, we're not horses, so it's not like our own, but it still is enough that it fits into the receptor, which your receptor is there's estrogen, there's hormone receptors all over the body. Those receptors are like a little satellite dish looking for the hormone so it's looking for estrogen, grabs onto the estrogen, right fit. So the horse's estrogen looks enough like our own, so do xenoestrogens. So estrogens in our environment, your receptors will prefer xenoestrogens over our own, which is very depressing. So we'll actually occupy the receptor site.
And block it from your own natural.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we don't want the synthetic chemical version of an estrogen, right? So this is where we see some negative effects of estrogen coming in. So the study was done. It was, like I said, largest study ever done. But the study was done on synthetic progestin and horse's urine estradiol. Okay. Within a few years, many of these women started to develop uterine cancer, heart disease, and breast cancer. So they pulled the chute on this study, sent out the worldwide message, get every woman off of HRT, it's dangerous. So every doctor, still to this day, most of them, took their women off HRT. Well, the studies have now been looked into a lot deeper now.
Yeah.
And the truth of the studies, and any one of you can go online and look this up for yourself. You don't have to believe me.
Yeah, we'll add links to the studies in the show notes.
Yes. The estrogen only arm of the study, where these women were using Premarin, which was the horse's urine, estrogen. If they were on that only, not the progestin, they actually showed a decrease in breast cancer by 23%.
Against the other group.
Against the other group. It was the group that was on the progestins and the estrogen that had the increase in heart disease and uterine cancer.
Wow.
So it's the progestin that is what was so bad in that study. And so I don't recommend any woman to ever be on it. The Premarin is an oral form of estrogen. Anything taken orally is going to have you're going to increase your risk of heart attack and stroke. That's why birth control also has that, because birth control is very high amounts of estrogen, way higher than usually bioidentical hormone therapy uses. So even using the Premarin, the results were better than women not using it or using the progestin in combination with it. So now we have something called bioidentical hormone therapy, which comes from yams and soy, and the two when you look at it, they are identical to our own. Your body doesn't know the difference. So bioidentical is extremely safe. You use it transdermally or in suppository form. There's different ways you can do it. It's not taken orally. You can do progesterone orally, but that's shown to be very safe. And the results are amazing. And so you can give a woman a little bit of estrogen and a little bit of progesterone, and boom, her anxiety and depression can go away. Estrogen has massive effects on your brain. There's so much research coming out on the effects of estrogen on no estrogen on Alzheimer's disease and dementia. So it's being shown to help prevent Alzheimer's disease, dementia, anxiety, depression. Oxytocin follows estrogen around in the body, which is our feel-good hormone. So without it, we don't feel as good. Like the list goes on. Estrogen has 400 different functions in the body.
That's crazy.
So it can just help a woman to transition through this time. And it actually, all the research shows, Simon, that if a woman takes bioidentical hormone therapy, even for 1 year into menopause, she reduces her risk of all-cause mortality by 20%.
That's wild.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Yeah, that's phenomenal. And as you say, like we spoke about how hormones throughout the whole body, whether it's estrogen or progesterone, if any type of level is gonna plummet significantly, then so many different effects are going to happen all across the body, because we have these receptors on all the cells of our body, and you say we have xenoestrogens, like foreign estrogens that live in our environment, that are going to take up the place in these receptor sites, and that actually happens for like a lot of different hormones. So it's just really, I don't want to say it is really complicated and complex, but the solution in many cases is really simple because of that complexity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, unfortunately, we still can't use them as this like miracle Band-Aid. And I tell women this because they're like, oh, so if I take this, like all my anxiety and depression is going to go away and I'm going to lose all this weight. And well, you also have to have a very healthy gut to take, for hormones, all hormones, whether they're in your body or coming from the outside. You have to have a healthy gut. You still have to eat well, because if you don't eat well, you're going to have inflammation of the brain, and your body's not going to process those hormones as well, because your liver is going to be clogged up. So you got to get rid of the toxin, the toxic load off your body. You got to get rid of the xenoestrogens in your environment, because they're going to compete for that receptor site, whether it's from your own or from bioidentical hormones. So you have to still do your due diligence and to clean up all of this stuff around you in order for your body to become optimized on hormone therapy.
Yeah, I'd love to jump in and talk about, I think we'll actually do this on another episode. Maybe you come back and talk about how the microbiome and the different microorganisms that live within the gut have a significant impact on your hormones. And in so many cases, like serotonin, for example, the majority of it is made within your gut. We could talk about that for hours.
Yeah.
But I'd love to ask you about, I was going through your website yesterday, and you've got this hormone quiz.
Mm-hmm.
And let's take this quick quiz and find out which ones are stopping you from losing weight. Can you just tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, it's actually a very comprehensive quiz, so it takes a couple of minutes to get through it, but I go through 5 of the top hormone dysfunctions that I see in women. And so it's just a quiz, but it's a really great starting point, because you can take this quiz and then I actually give you all of the ebooks. Doesn't matter even what your top one is, because hormones all work synergistically together. So you may have a top one that comes out. So let's say you come out with estrogen dominance, and then you'll start to read through these they're just little mini ebooks, and you'll be like, ooh, but I also fall into the cortisol category.
Yeah.
And ooh, I also fall into the low progesterone category, or whatever, thyroid, whatever it might be. So it's kind of a great first start to trying to say, okay, maybe is hormones part of this? And especially if you're ticking yes for everything that's coming up, okay, I definitely have some hormone stuff happening in my body. And then I also give you a 2-week, what I call the hormone and metabolic reboot meal plan that comes with your test results. So you can it's a way that I've developed as far as eating goes when it comes to keeping your hormones safe, and as well losing weight and balancing those hormones.
Yeah, not allowing for spikes.
Yes.
Drops.
Yeah. So it's low inflammatory. It kind of goes between paleo keto. So I got some fasting in there, but not chronic fasting, because I always think, okay, women have adrenal problems. So I do this kind of carb cycling, calorie cycling, because I'll have to come back to talk about weight loss here, but basically if you go too low calorie for too long, your body starts to slow down your metabolism, your thyroid starts to have a problem with it. If you fast too much, your cortisol is going to go up. All of these things. So I've kind of taken everything that I got from working with so many women and said, okay, how should a woman be eating? What's ideal? And I still recommend, okay, you still have to tweak this kind of diet, like to make it your own, because you might not agree with all the foods in here, or you may be totally fine with adding some other stuff in there. So it's a template, but it's a great template.
That's awesome. Yeah, I love those online quizzes when they're done well, that it helps people reflect a little bit more personally on what they're going through. And also, if it's something that's up there on your website, so many people are going through it as well, and not feeling alone in something like that can be very helpful. Just on hormone testing, what types of hormone testing do you do, and how important is it to do those extensive tests?
I think it's very important. I'm actually become very into testing, because especially with hormones, there are a lot of symptoms that can overlap each other, and the protocols are very different. So let's say somebody has adrenal fatigue, they could actually show up that looks like they have actually too much cortisol, because there's so many things that overlap. So things like that, you wouldn't want to give somebody the same supplements for low cortisol as you would the high cortisol, or you could actually do further damage. So to get an exact, here's what you need to do, is very helpful. So in order to do that, you need to test. So I personally offer saliva hormone testing for the sex hormones. So, estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone, and then the adrenal hormones. I do a 4-point cortisol test as well as a DHEA test. Thyroid, I do blood spot testing. So these are all done in the comforts of your own home. Saliva testing tests what's called available hormone levels, which means that they are available to your body to use. When you go to the doctor and you ask for hormone testing, they'll usually just say no. If you can get them to do it.
There's ways around that.
If you can get them to do it, they'll do blood and serum. They won't tell you what day to do it. So they'll just be like, okay, fine, here's your requisition.
That was my next question, is it's obviously important time to do any type of test.
Yes, because you need, like I said, progesterone's produced in the second half of the month. So if you go get tested in the first half of the month, you're going to look like you have no progesterone. Yeah. And then you'll start taking progesterone when you don't even need it, or vice versa with the estrogen, whatever it is, right? It is good to find out. And serum, so not only do they not tell you what day to test it on, but they'll also The serum only tests bound hormone levels. So saliva's available. These ones are bound. They're bound to a protein called sex hormone binding globulin. It just means that very little of those bound hormones are actually being utilized by the body. If you're a cycling woman, this is a problem because I've seen it on many labs where people have done both. I've seen it on my own labs. I've done both, and they can be completely opposite, where it looks like you have these really, really healthy levels of, let's say, estrogen, but then you do availables and there's none, or whatever it might be. I've seen people with this. I saw one woman recently who showed up on blood that she had no testosterone. So the doctor put her on testosterone. I did saliva hormone testing and she was off the charts, and she had been breaking out in acne, growing hair, like facial hair. Wow. And there was the exact wrong thing. If you're in late perimenopause stage or menopausal stage, then you can do serum and it can be accurate because there's just no hormones. So it will show up in the serum at that point.
Great. So it's not only, it's important to test and not guess, but it's also huge to do the right tests because there are wrong ones as well, and doing them at the right times. And obviously the person who's actually looking at the results, having to know all that information as well, is very important as well. Wow. Yep. Yeah. I think that's a great place to finish up. I'd love to have you back on to talk more about weight loss and talk about gut health and hormones. I hope you'd be open to that. But how can people get hold of you, Karen?
KarenMartel.com. Nice and easy.
Perfect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you can also find me on my own podcast. If you want more information about this, I've had a podcast for a couple of years. It's called The Other Side of Weight Loss. Talk lots about tons of mental health stuff, tons on weight loss and hormones. And so you could definitely find lots of information on there.
Awesome. And the podcast is on iTunes, Spotify.
Yes. Anywhere.
Awesome.
Anywhere and everywhere.
Great. And you can go to KarenMartel.com, and there's some really cool recipes and blog posts on there as well. And if you want to connect with her, you can go straight to that. But thank you so much for coming in.
Yes, thanks for having me.
This was great.
Yes.
And I'm excited we can continue with this conversation another time.
Yep.
And jump into some more really interesting topics.
You bet.
But thank you so much. That's it for this episode of Truehope Cast. I hope you enjoyed the show. All show notes will be included with everything we spoke about today, studies, contacting Karen, etc. Thank you again, once again.
Thanks, Simon.
Have a beautiful day, everyone. Goodbye.